Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you're watching this live or in the replay. Thank you for joining session 2 of CI/CD Summer School. Actually, I'm sorry, session 3 of CI/CD Summer School. It's labeled as 2 because we started counting from 0. I'm your host, Michael Jenkins. I'm a LinkedIn Learning DevOps author and also a computer engineer by education and trade. Been working in the industry for about 25 plus years. I lose count. But I'm happy to be here with you, be here with you today. Thanks for joining me. And we'll just start off. We like to get interactive as we start these sessions. If you're joining us live, just drop in the comments where you're joining us from. I am joining you all, or broadcasting from Southern California, right outside of Los Angeles. And yeah, this is not the beach that I'm close to. I'll have to try to get a picture of the beach. Yeah, maybe I'll do that for the next session. We'll get a background of Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, Torrance Beach, Santa Monica has a lovely beach. Venice Beach is nice. I'll try to get a picture of one of those spots so I can show you guys kind of what the outlook is here for the beaches. Session 3. Let's see. We're going to have a pretty interesting conversation today. I think you'll enjoy it. The other question that I had for the interactive portion here is, if you're joining us today, what projects are you working on? And what skills are you learning during this CI/CD summer school? If you joined us from the beginning, you know that this is just kind of a time for us to get together, chat, chop it up on CI/CD as sort of the containing, like the overarching topic. But there's so many other things that tie into our skill and our craft as automators that practice CI/CD. So I'm just curious to know what skills you're working on, what other projects that you're working on. One thing that I wanted to share, in my day job, I'm currently working on migrating applications from a legacy runtime platform to a more modern runtime platform. And it's really interesting because when you think about picking up something and moving it from where it's been living for maybe years and porting it to somewhere else, there's a lot of cruft that kind of comes along with that. And if you don't really have knowledge or background of that system, there are surprises. So it's always fun, and I enjoy working with legacy technology, and I think that's a very valuable skill to have. A lot of people want to jump in and use the new tech and everything, but I think it's really cool to have an understanding of legacy technologies and the modern technologies, because then you have opportunities like this. When people say, hey, we've been running on this platform for 15 years and it's been great, but we want to move to this platform over here, then you'll have the skills and the knowledge to help those people move from where they are, where they were running to where they need to be running. And then thank you for joining us, LinkedIn user. I can't see your name, but I see that you're also working on moving apps from on-premise to AWS. Cloud migrations are also fun because, yeah, when you're running in your on-premises, usually you have sort of a limited space, a limited, set of ability to scale. But when you're in the cloud, hey, sky's the limit, right? You can go big. Let's see what else. The skills that I'm learning how to share my thoughts and to host discussions like this through live stream. I'm using LinkedIn Live, and I'm also streaming to YouTube. So shout out to you if you're watching this replay or if you're watching it live on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining me. All right. Before we get to the meat of the discussion, let's go into what we've been doing. It's kind of quickly become a tradition for CI/CD Summer School, is to look at some topics from around the way. And these are resources that I tap into, and tools that I use, or podcasts that I listen to, content creators that I follow, that I take advantage of in my career, in my day-to-day work. And hopefully you can find some benefit from these particular resources as well. Okay. In the past, I featured multiple creators and shared maybe one or two things. Maybe if they were a YouTuber, I shared their YouTube. If they were a LinkedIn learning author, I shared their LinkedIn resources. We're not going to do that today. We're only going to have one particular entity, but I'm going to show you kind of the way that they multiply what I think is a really cool offering into different segments. It's really cool. And so what I want to share with you is the Cloud Posse office hours. Now, Cloud Posse themselves, they are a consultancy that work with companies that want to deploy applications or run infrastructure in AWS. They work with other clouds, but AWS is kind of like their main focus. And they have an open source library of Terraform modules that are like Legos. They're like building blocks, right? So if you come to them with some sort of application architecture, they can pull from this Terraform library and build out your architecture and hand it to you pretty quickly, from what I understand. And all of their Terraform modules are open source. So even if you don't use them as a consultancy and allow them to help you build out this infrastructure, you as an individual can tap into that open source library and use them just as they would. So you need to have some experience with Terraform and so on, but you still have the benefit of using their library. So along with that resource that they provide and their services that they provide, they also have a weekly office hours hosted by the CEO, Eric. And it's so cool, this particular office hours. Number one, it's free, it's live, it's a Zoom session. So you're basically online with all the folks that join the session. And Eric does a great job of collecting news that's kind of happened since the last office hours and sharing those news that are relevant to the industry that is associated with this. So they cover cloud news, software development news, home lab news, just like a lot of things that are interesting to people that are involved in cloud infrastructure, cloud engineering, and application development. But they also have, at the end of this particular office hours, a Q&A session. So it's almost like getting free consulting if you have a problem. Now, they're not going to solve your problem out of the box right there on the Q&A, but there are dozens of experts that attend this particular office hours, and they lend their thoughts and answers to questions that people pose. So if you have, a problem that you're encountering on AWS and you want to get like an expert take on it, maybe ChatGPT is not helping you, your peers aren't helping you, the documentation is not helping you, then you could join this office hours, ask your question, and these battle-hardened veterans that have been there before can help you solve your problem. They'll give you some direction or answers, hopefully to the question or solutions to the problem that you're solving. So definitely sign up for office hours. Join them on Wednesdays at it's 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, because that's the time that I particularly enjoy attending. It's going to vary depending on what your time zone is, but check them out for sure. So that's the office hours. That's how you get linked into the live session so that you can participate in person. They also sort of chop up and repurpose those office hours as a podcast. So if you can't make it to the office hours in person, you can listen to the office hours through the podcast. Now, I will say that the podcast loses a little bit of the fidelity of the office hours because it's audio, right? You're listening to a discussion, and like I mentioned before, there are maybe dozens of people that join these office hours, and it's very open. So Eric sort of leads the discussion, but then everybody just kind of chimes in. It's very open. So everybody can comment on whatever the topic is. And if you're listening to the podcast, you may not know who's speaking. So it loses a little bit of the fidelity, if you listen to the podcast. But I will say, if you're an avid podcaster, that this is a great opportunity to follow up with office hours. Just add it to your podcast feed, and you can scan through it, listen to it at 2x or whatever, and just kind of tune into any topics that might be important or relevant to you. Or you can catch them on YouTube. So they also record the live office hours, and I mean, we already saw how they use that as a podcast, but they also make the video available on YouTube. So this might be the best way to consume the office hours if you can't attend in person, because you can scroll through it, you can pause, you can see who's speaking, you can see the screen, because they'll share the web pages that they're talking about or applications that they're discussing, and you can catch all of that in video through the YouTube playback. Along with the office hours, they also share other videos on their YouTube channel. And I think the key with this is, and I've mentioned this with some of the other creators that I've shared with you in previous sessions, is that they're sharing opinions, like opinions and thoughts that have been proven by experience. So we can read the documentation, all that we want. We can Google, is this thing good, or whatever the case is. But to have somebody tell you like what their actual thought is and what their opinion is on a software or technology or something like that is very valuable. So you'll get that through the office hours, but then they also offer additional information in videos on their YouTube channel. So if you have the opportunity, sign up for office hours, subscribe to their YouTube channel, and check it out. I'm sure you'll pick up something that'll be beneficial to you somewhere in your career. I get a lot of benefit out of their office hours, so I just thought I would share that with you. Okay, let's jump right into the meat of this session. Well, maybe not the meat, but we're going to take a look at what happened last week. Last week, we talked about the 3 essential CI/CD facts. And basically, it came down to automation, right? We saw how automation was key to all the steps of CI, CD, and CD. And then there was a bonus fact as well. So go back and review. If you didn't join us for session 1, go back and check out session 1 and catch those 3 essential CI/CD facts. And we also had some automation, I was looking ahead here. We also had some homework. And the first thing, or the main topic, was to think about automation and to think about some tasks that you can automate in CI, CD, CD. And then we were going to review some GitHub Actions workflows. The first one being relatively easy for the Hello World Python application that we're working with, and then also for the Hugo static site generator. That's the beast mode. They have some publicly visible pipelines that are running on GitHub Actions that test their software. So I thought that would be kind of interesting to take a look at those. So let's review these. I am going to let's see here. I'm going to share my screen so that we can walk through these in review. Okay, so right now we're seeing the GitHub Actions view of the last run for the Hello World application. This pipeline has 2 stages. It's got an integration stage and a delivery stage. And if we click into one of these stages, we can see these steps here that actually run in this particular stage. So we're setting up Python, we're installing our dependencies, we're checking the formatting, linting, and then we're running tests. And that's pretty much all this integration step does. So one thing I do like about GitHub Actions, it gives a good visualization of what's happening in a stage. And the stages, as you can see over here on the left, and then what's happening, this actual steps that are happening on the right. And the corollary to this, or how we can actually codify these stages and steps, it's in our workflow configuration, right? So we tell it where this, we tell GitHub Actions where this pipeline is going to run, and then we actually define these steps. So we can pretty much draw a one-to-one parallel, right, of what our stages are. In this case, these stages are called jobs, and there's our integration job, there's our delivery job. And then inside these jobs, we can see the actual steps that take place. And then the commands or the action that gets called. For example, this action is set up Python. This is what the step is actually going to do when it runs. Yeah, pretty simple, right? Okay, so that's a good, excuse me, that's a good example of a very simple workflow. Let's now take a look at the next one, which was the Hugo test run. Okay, I'm going to let you all take a look at that. I need to get a sip of water real quick. Okay, so this is a little bit more complex than the hello world that we were just looking at, right? There are multiple jobs or stages. In this view, it looks like there's only one stage, but actually these are multiple stages. They all just happen to be running in parallel. They're running at the same time. In the previous workflow that we looked at, we saw that little bar that sort of connected them. That just meant those stages were running in parallel, more like a pipeline, right? In this case, all of these stages are running at the same time. Excuse me. So let's take a look at one of these a little bit closer. If I tap into this test, Mac OS latest, then we can see it's kind of going through that same process that we saw in the hello world, right? It's checking out the code, it's setting up some run times, and then running some commands, installing some more stuff. And then it gets down here, it runs some checks, and then it runs some tests. It's pretty much the same thing that we saw in our hello world, but there's just more of it, right? Hugo's a bigger application than a hello world Python script. So there's more stuff that they have to do. Also, I mean, you see here that they're running on Ubuntu, Mac OS, Windows. They're testing it on multiple platforms. We only tested on one platform with that hello world, right? But let's take a look at the workflow file for this particular workflow. And I mean, we can see there's a lot going on here, right? They're defining environment variables. Here's where the jobs are defined. They have this matrix here. Maybe we'll talk about matrices in another session of the different operating systems, the different versions of Go that they want to test on, and all of that builds out these tests, these stages that they run. And again, these are all just the commands that they're running. They give the name, like here, they're just installing Ruby, and they give the Ruby version. And on and on and on. So it goes until you get all the way down here to where they're actually running the tests that are appropriate for this particular operating system or this particular version of Go. So I hope that you enjoyed looking through these, just kind of getting a little bit more hands-on with an actual CI/CD tool and some of the configuration behind it. The hello world, which I offered that because if you're new to CI/CD, that might have been a little bit easier to understand. And then also this Hugo workflow, because it shows you sort of where you can go with GitHub Actions and how sort of rich it is in the way that you can test very, very complex scenarios. So let's get out of here and go back to the slides. And get into what I think, yes, is the topic for today: rethinking CI/CD tools. And that's why I wanted to sort of get into a discussion where we thought about this idea of a tool itself. If we drill down to the essential element and we ask ourselves the question, what is a tool, right? So if we follow, one thing I like to keep in mind when I'm developing software, when I'm developing tools for myself or stuff that I need in my day-to-day work, is I like to follow the Unix philosophy, and that is write programs that do one thing and do it well. And the QR code and the link that you see here will take you to the Wikipedia page that gives you all the background that you could ever care to have on the Unix philosophy. But this philosophy, as far as software development, we can see it applied in a lot of different applications and tools that we use every day. And I got a couple examples here. grep, which we use to sort of use regular expressions to pull content out of files. awk and sed, they're more like almost like programming runtimes. awk in particular, because you can write whole awk scripts, right? It's got a configuration language behind it that you can use to manipulate text files. And the same thing with sed. It's a stream editor so that you can modify text coming in from one side based on some sort of configuration or rules, and then send that modified text out the other side so that some other application, some other tool can consume it. So all of these tools that are, I mean, they've been around as far as I can remember. I don't know when they were created in relation to the Unix operating system, but they definitely follow the Unix philosophy that they do one thing and they do it well. So that's what I'm like, I started to think about how we call CI/CD tools, right? because is a CI/CD tool, does it do one thing and does it do it well? Is like, is that all that we think about for for our what we're calling our CI/CD tools? And I think CI/CD, what we're calling tools, are much more than just a single purpose tool. Like we're using grep to pull text out of a text file, right? But we're using GitHub Actions and Jenkins and TeamCity and Bamboo and Circle CI. So for so much more than just running scripts, right? Because really that's kind of what they are, is like script runners, right? But there's so much more built into that. And that kind of led me to the thought that we're working not with CI/CD tools, but with CI/CD frameworks, or like a toolbox, if you want to use that particular thought. But it's a collection of tools that we can use for perhaps a single purpose: deploying our application, linting our code, compiling an executable, or something along those lines. So I started to think about our CI/CD tools more like a framework. So let's sort of get into that discussion of what the pieces of the CI/CD applications that we tap into that make them a framework. Number one, workflow management. So one of the things, the tenets that I always kind of go back to is that a lot of people will say you're not doing CI/CD unless you're using Jenkins. You're not using CI/CD unless you're using GitHub Actions, so on and so forth. But you can do CI/CD with just your computer, right? Just your a make file. If you're familiar with the make, which is also has roots in the Unix space. It's basically it's also a script runner. You define targets and tell those targets what to do. You can use those types of tools in your local operating system to run CI processes locally, right? But the benefit that we get from applications like GitHub Actions and Jenkins and others is that they allow us to create complex workflows, and they manage them for us. They'll pull down the code, they'll put the tools in place, and they'll run the commands that we require based on our specifications, and they'll sort of control all of that. They've got built-in facilities for sending emails when the tests are complete, sending other types of notifications, and so they, when I say they, I mean these CI/CD frameworks, they manage that workflow, right? From beginning to end, we tap into them for that particular capability. Next up is plugins and extensions. Now, if we think about the sort of examples that we started with, grep, awk, and sed, you can provide configurations for them. Like these tools have rules and direction that we can give them in the form of, some sort of text configuration. But when we extend them, it actually becomes a new tool. And I think there's also, if you read that Unix philosophy page, there's also another tenet of Unix philosophy that says, instead of adding new features to a tool that's already doing its job great, create a new tool. So don't mess up what's already working. Just do something different, right? But with our CI/CD frameworks, we tap into that base workflow management, and we extend it with plugins or extensions, literally extensions. And I think Jenkins is the king for this, right? So Jenkins has like buckets of plugins that you can pull from. If you like come across something that you need to add to your CI/CD workflow in Jenkins, I bet you there is a plugin for it. And if there isn't, there are specifications that you can use to create your own plugin to add that capability. And other tools can be extended as well. In particular, so let's think about this. GitHub Actions at its core is a workflow management framework, right? It'll run your jobs, it'll run all the steps in your jobs, but those steps call an action, or they call some other tool. So that action is where you're extending the actual framework, you're extending the application. And so GitHub calls them actions, Jenkins calls them plugins, Circle CI calls them orbs, Bitbucket Pipelines calls them pipes. And in most cases, these are just Dockerized applications. So there's a Docker file somewhere that defines how the application is built, the capabilities that it gives, and that is how we extend our framework. That's how we sort of tap into it to make it do something more than what it was initially intended to do. And let's see here. Let's go to the next one. And that is integrations. So our CI/CD frameworks, along with managing our workflow and giving us the capabilities to do more than what the base functionality is, they also give us integrations to other tools, frameworks, and applications. And the number one thing that I can think of right off the top of my head is the cloud, right? So using our actions and other capabilities and features of the framework, we can deploy our compiled executables, our container images to runtimes on cloud platforms that are like not associated with where our workflow is running, if that makes sense. The framework gives us that integration. They also tie into registries where we can store the executables that we build and test inside our workflows, like Docker Hub. GitHub Actions has GitHub packages. We can tap into that. And that's even native to the application. That's like another application built into the framework that we can tap into. So that's just like integrations times 2, right, for GitHub Actions. So I think that's like another key thing, that what we're calling a tool, it makes it so much more than a tool, because we can tap into yet another capability outside of even where we're running our workflows. Okay, let me get caught up here to where I'm supposed to be. And so as I thought about, rethinking CI/CD tools and referring to them as frameworks, I really wish I had named this session "Stop Using CI/CD Tools." Like, that would have been total clickbait, right? Like, I would have clicked on that particular session. If that came up through my feed, I would have been like, what do you mean stop using CI/CD tools? And that's kind of like the clickbaity portion of it, right? I want to hear what the discussion is behind that. But instead, or I guess the follow-on for that is, we should stop using CI/CD tools and start using, or even continue using, depending on how you look at it, CI/CD frameworks. So yeah, just is rethinking the way that we refer to these applications as tools, like this single-use thing, and realizing that it's more of a framework that we can use for more than just the one thing. And yeah, thanks for joining us again from Minneapolis, Frosty. Yeah, I wish I had really used that. I wish I had not called this rethinking and just called it stop using CI/CD tools. The engagement behind that probably would have been bananas, right? But it'll just be our little inside joke, right? Okay, so that pretty much wraps up our discussion for today. And we're going to jump right into the homework for this particular session. And I mean, we talked about frameworks. I'm going to do my best. I will probably still say CI/CD tools. I'm going to do my best to try to say CI/CD frameworks. So if you're taking some of my courses and you see updates to those courses and I stop saying tools, I start saying frameworks, just know that this is like the origin story for that, right? But I will still say CI/CD tools. But I just want us to know that when we call these tools, I think we're selling them short, right? We should really be calling them CI/CD frameworks, or maybe even like a CI/CD platform, something like that. So the homework for this, I want you to compare configurations for the Hello World pipeline. So in the last session, we introduced this Python script. It's just a beautiful, lovely little Python script that prints Hello World. And it's very simple. We run a test to see if it prints Hello World, right? That is the integration portion of the pipeline. And then the delivery portion of the pipeline is we zip up the main.py file and we make that zip file available for somebody to download. That's the process. Super simple, super easy. So what I've made available in the repo for this session, and you'll find the QR code and the link on the screen, is configurations for different frameworks that implement this particular pipeline. There is a GitHub Actions configuration. You'll find that that's written in YAML. There is a Jenkins pipeline, and Jenkins uses a subset of the Groovy programming language known as a DSL, or domain-specific language. And there's also a workflow or configuration file for TeamCity, which uses a Kotlin DSL. And really what I want you to gather from this is we understand the basic tenet of this pipeline, right? We integrate our code, we lint it, we run some tests, and then we package up this zip file. We know that that's the purpose, right? I could do that from my command line, right? But I just want you to see how it's implemented in these different frameworks. There's benefits, there's pros and cons to approaches for all of these tools, frameworks. And I just want you to see how the configuration differs and is similar between different approaches to implementing this particular pipeline. You don't need access. I don't intend for you to run these particular pipelines. If you want to, fork the repo, run it in GitHub Actions, stand up a Jenkins server, stand up a TeamCity server. If you already have access to one, then you might be able to run that. I did share a course. I didn't put the link together like I did last time because I don't intend for you to run these particular workflows. But if you go to my profile and look for, it'll be the last, like a post close to the top. And I've shared a link to Continuous Integration Tools, which is a course that I published. It's been published and updated for a couple of years now, at least. And in that course, I give a very quick overview of CI/CD tools and kind of gives you, it's like a primer on these tools and how to get started, what the benefits and pros and cons of them are. If you need a reference, then check out that particular course, Continuous Integration Tools. If you go to LinkedIn Learning, you can find it there. And in a future session, I will share explicitly how to get LinkedIn Learning for free if you don't already have access to it. There's no secret to it, but I'll plan to share that in the next session because I'm offering all this content. Say, hey, take this course. I don't expect for you to buy these courses. If you already have a subscription that's available to you through your employer or something like that, then that's great. But I will show you how that you can get LinkedIn Learning for free. Join me in the next session for that. Okay, I think that is it. Yeah, that brings us to the end of this particular session. If you joined us before, I said I wasn't going to spend too much time on these sessions. We're just going to get in. We're going to discuss these topics. We're going to do our around the way introductions and all that. And then we're going to get out of here because we have a whole lot of summer yet to enjoy. So I want to thank you for joining me. Actually, I did. Let me take that off and let me just go back to me. How about that? Yeah, I just want to thank you for joining me today for this session of CI/CD Summer School. Check out the homework. If you got questions or you want to discuss, then drop a comment in the event page for this on LinkedIn Learning or YouTube, and we'll connect. In the meantime, I didn't add it to the homework for this week, but look out for the registration for next week. And that's what I also wanted to share. I've gotten some requests for people have asked, hey, how many sessions are there going to be in this particular CI/CD Summer School? I don't know. There will be at least 4 or 5. You know, we're already up to the 3rd session, so we're going to have a couple more. I'll say that at least, right? Maybe more than that. We'll go through at least through August, right? But I don't want to limit myself. Let me say that. So if we wrap up CI/CD Summer School, then maybe we'll go on to another topic and continue the discussion around using these frameworks, working with the cloud, DevOps, SRE. We'll see what the topic. We'll see what our path or how our path leads us into the future, right? So look out. In addition to the homework, reviewing those frameworks, look out for the registration for the next session of CI/CD Summer School. So thanks so much for joining me. I really, really do appreciate your time and attention to what I have to say. And I look forward to connecting with you on the next session. We'll see you then.